Promising prospects for the people of the North who have been denied their fundamental rights for so long. Speaking of freedom and rights, we now examine those of the media. What do you expect from the media? And what should the media, namely journalists, expect from society? Should the media face restrictions in the interests of greater goals for the country? Or should they be allowed to freely report on events and developments and let the public decide? Or are they unable to do that due to partisan concerns or political interference or the lack of professional capacity? The questions are many and the answers are complex and hard to come by. But we attempted to find out more in our next report.
The war in the North may be over, but according to rights activists, the war against the media wages on. Journalists and human rights groups staged a demonstration in Colombo on the 10th of June 2009 to remind people that this was still the case. There were some new faces in the picket lines. Several among those who participated in previous protests have left the country. One is in a hospital bed, injured and demoralized. It is the abduction and assault of Poddala Jayantha that has brought the media freedom issue to the forefront again. Poddala Jayantha was waylaid and attacked on his way back home near Embuldeniya in Colombo. Inside the white van that he was hauled into, he was beaten and tortured and eventually dumped on the roadside a few kilometers away. Poddala Jayantha has had to undergo surgery on a badly broken leg and has suffered other injuries caused by the violence he was subjected to. The demonstration or satyagraha in Colombo attracted many, although there have been clear signs that lobbying for media freedom is not welcome in the present context. Poddala Jayantha had himself faced death threats in the past as he called for the protection of media freedom and journalists' rights in Sri Lanka.
Poddala මෑත ඉතිහාසයේ මේ රටේ වෙච්ච හැම මාධ්‍යට එරෙහි වෙච්ච හැම අභියෝගයකදීම හැම තර්ජනයකදීම හැම ප්‍රහාරයකදීම නොබියව ඉස්සරහට අවිල්ලා ජනමාධ්‍යවේදීන් සංවිධානය කරපු මාධ්‍යවේදියාගේ අයිතිය තහවුරු කරන්න පෙනී සිටපු විශාල කාර්යභාරයක් ඉටු කරපු ජනමාධ්‍යවේදී. ඒ නිසා මේ මාධ්‍ය මර්ධනය කරන මේ කණ්ඩායමට මේ බලවතුන්ට මේ පිරිසට උමනා වෙලා තියෙනවා ප්‍රථමයෙන්ම මාධ්‍ය ක්‍රියාකාරීන් දඩයම් කරන්න.
The problem seems to be largely associated with war and conflict-related reporting. But more generally too, journalists feel the conditions they are working under are difficult and unacceptable.
කරුණු දෙකක් තියෙනවා. එකක් රටේ දීර්ඝ කාලයක් තිබිච්ච යුද්ධය අවසන් වෙලා රටේ සාමාන්‍ය ජනතාව සාමකාමී ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී පරිසරයක ජීවත් වෙන අපේක්ෂා කරන යුගයක්. ඒ බලාපොරොත්තු විශාල පහරක් එල්ල වෙලා තියෙනවා. දෙවැනි කාරණය මේ රටේ දැවැන්ත ආයුධ සන්නද්ධ කණ්ඩායම මර්ධනය කරන්න ශක්තියක් තිබිච්ච දැවැන්ත බුද්ධිජාලයක් තිබිච්ච ආණ්ඩුවේ ආරක්ෂණ යාන්ත්‍රණයට ජනමාධ්‍යවේදීන්ට එළවෙන එකඳු තර්ජනයක් පිළිබඳ ප්‍රහාරයක් පිළිබඳ මේ මරාදමීමක් පිළිබඳ පරීක්ෂණ පවත්වන්න බැරි වෙලා තියෙනවා.
But even among journalists, opinion is divided about the problems faced by the media and the causes for it.
War against the media. I think there is a war against citizens, and that comes out of a flawed constitution. It's not about personal, it's not about who is in power, who is in this position or that, but this constitution makes citizens vulnerable. And I don't think the incumbents are to blame for that. People can use laws, abuse laws. Sometimes they do things within the law, which I think are pretty nasty. I don't know.
Poddala Jayantha had been denounced as an LTT supporter in public statements by government representatives just days before his abduction. This was the 8th incident involving the violations of journalists' rights over the past 6 months. The 15th-month detention of Jeyaraj has been upheld by the Supreme Court. But in a surprising development, another journalist, Vidyaran, was released from custody. Vidyaran is the editor of the Sudaroli, a media organization which has faced many attacks both in Colombo and Jaffna.
Even recent abduction and arrest of the editor Vidyaran, he was taken to courts, then the results is well known to the public now. He was released by the courts without any charges. I take this opportunity to tell you, even though by unknown people he was abducted, but then subsequently the Colombo Crimes Division took control of him. From the very beginning, we have been talking about the rights of the people, rights of the Tamil people. Unlike any other papers, we directly tell the rights and wrongs of which is not digested by the so-called parties. The problems mainly we face through paramilitary. They want to achieve something suitable to them, for which our paper may be a hindrance.
Weeks after the incident, Poddala Jayantha's assailants have not been identified as yet. And going by the track record of investigating authorities, it may be months, if ever, before people know who was responsible for the attacks. In the case of Poddala's abduction, 2 people were arrested and subsequently released on bail. They are 2 journalists who were responsible for informing the IGP about Poddala Jayantha's assault.
මුලින්ම සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ දැන් අපිට ආරංචි වෙනවා මේ පොද්දල වගේ කෙනෙක් පැහැරගත්තා කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ අපි ටක් බක් ගාලා ඒක හොයන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. මේක ඇත්ත තත්ත්වය මොකද්ද කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ අපිට ඒක තහවුරු වෙනවා. මේ පොද්දල තමයි පැහැරගෙන තියෙන්නේ කියලා. අපි වහාම කරන්නේ IGPට දැනුවත් කරන එක. IGPට කියලා ඊට පස්සේ අපි ප්‍රවෘත්ති අධ්‍යක්ෂ අනුෂ පැල්පිට දැනුම් දෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ මාධ්‍ය ඇමති ලක්ෂ්මන් යාපාට කියනවා මාධ්‍යයක් හැටියට අපිට තියෙන්නේ සත්‍ය තොරතුරු වාර්තා කරන එක. ඒතකොට ඒක කරගෙන යනකොට ඔය වගේ බාධා ආරවන්නව ඇති වෙනවා. ඒක සාමාන්‍යයි. නමුත් දැන් මේ සිදුවීම් වලින් පේන්නේ අපිට ඒව නිසා ඇති වෙන මේ කියන්නේ ඉලක්ක කළා අපිව අපහසුතාවයට පත් කරන්න එහෙම නැත්නම් හැරස්මන්ට් කරන මේ වැඩක් හැටියට තමයි තියෙන්නේ. ඉස්සරහින් ඕනම මාධ්‍යවේදියෙක්ට මම හිතන්නේ අනාගතය අවිනිශ්චිතයි.
At a meeting that followed the Satyagraha against the abduction of Poddala Jayantha, journalists' concerns were highlighted by several speakers.
රාජ්‍ය ත්‍රස්තවාදය තවමත් නින්දිතව ම්ලේච්ඡව ඒ ආකාරයටම ඉදිරියට යන බව පසුගිය සතියේ පොද්දල ජයන්ත මහතාගේ ප්‍රහාරයෙන් අපිට පැහැදිලි වුණා.
ලසන්ත වෙනුවෙන් අපි මෙතන ඉන්න මේ විදිහට කතා කරා. දැන් අද ජයන්ත වෙනුවෙන් කතා කරා. හෙට කවුරු වෙනුවෙන් කතා කරන්න වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
අපිට පාරේ බහලා යන්න බෑ. යුද්ධේ ඉවර වුණා තාම අර පැජරෝ යනවා පාරේ.
They are calling for freedom of expression and a safer environment for journalists. But how likely are things to change in the near future?
There are a lot of attacks on media personnel, which have the major problem is that they have not been investigated to conclusion. But I don't think that journalists have any special immunity, from the laws of the land. If they infringe the law, then they have to be, called and action should be taken. That is one thing that we have to understand. Sometimes these media organizations act as though they are saints. They are not. One of the biggest problems in Sri Lanka and the media is that those who advocate media freedom, those who are vociferous about media freedom, are utterly compromised in terms of integrity, in terms of they are engaged in fraud. The main media organizations which say Sri Lanka is a failed state, that there is no media freedom, they don't have the moral right to talk.
What does this mean for the media, which is often described as the watchdog of society, raising awareness and informing people about important issues? Is this the expectation for the media in Sri Lanka too?
ඇත්ත කොතනද එතන මාධ්‍ය නිදහස තියෙනවා. වංචාවක් කරොත් ඉතින් මාධ්‍ය ඒක නිදහස් මාධ්‍යයක් නැති වෙනවා එතන. ඒකයි කියන්න තියෙන්නේ.
මගේ පොදු අදහස නම් මාධ්‍ය නිදහස් මාධ්‍යයක් යුතුයි. මාධ්‍යයට නියම සත්‍ය ප්‍රකාශ කළ යුතුයි.
මාධ්‍ය නිදහස ආයති විදිහට ප්‍රයෝජන ගන්න නැතුව වැඩ කරොත් ඉතින් රජයට පාලනය කරන්න ඕනේ නැහැ.
I think that absolute media freedom is a myth. So we can only speak of degrees of media freedom, and which implies that things can always get better.
Is free media really a myth? We're going in for a break now, but when we come back, we hear the government's view on this matter.